Welcome back to the Community Roundtable. I'm very excited to chat with our guests here today as we continue our conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and look at the months honoring certain groups of people. March is Women's History Month. And so I wanted to start off by, given the state of our society today, what is the importance in having these months, and what does it really mean? Jami?
So I want to frame that with, it's important to know what our history is before we can acknowledge where we're at. And not just the facts, but some of the underlying nonverbal beliefs. There is a thing in psychology called intergenerational transmission, and it's the complex and dynamic process in which values, ideas, and behaviors are transmitted across generations. So not everyone is in agreement on the ideas of what the roles are for women. So some of the history, again, before we can address where we're at, we have to address the history. In biblical times, women were considered property. They either belonged to their father, their husband, or their brother. And so keep in mind, although we think that's ancient times, that's a document or a book, the Bible, that we currently use. And so that's the context of information that still is that exists on a daily basis in our society. Other things to consider were, I'll make it very current. It wasn't until 1974 that a woman could get a credit card in her own name without being co-signed by her husband, father, or another man. Also in 1974 was the first time it became, it was illegal for a bank to deny a woman a mortgage without being co-signed by a man. So that was the first time a woman could actually get a loan on her own. It was in 1960 that women could legally open a bank account of their own, and I have a little story about that. In 1920, so to me that's still kind of current, it was illegal to sell any form of contraception. It was not until 1965 that the Supreme Court said that it had to be legal across the entire country, not just state to state. It had to be legal across the entire country that married couples could purchase contraception. Married couples. In some states, it was still illegal for a single woman to buy contraception. So when we're talking about the 1965 and 1974, that's in my lifetime. So that was not a long time ago. On a very personal note, I had opened a bank account when I was 18 years old. And when I got married, I added my husband to that bank account. So that was probably, 15 years later. About 8 years into that, we decided to change banks, and I went to my bank and I said, I'd like to close my account and withdraw all my money. And they looked at my account and they said, sorry, we can't do that. You need to have your husband with you. This was less than 25 years ago that I was denied access to my money. And when I pointed out to the bank that it was my account, I had simply added my husband, they still denied me access to my money. So it's important, if we're going to look at what things are like in our society now, it's important to look at where we've come from.
Makes us think that we've actually come a long way in that time, because that is some revelation news. I would be rather upset if someone denied me to my money like that. That's huge. As our historian, how does that make you feel?
Oh, well, I feel like we have made huge strides, but I think we have a distance to go yet. And I think that, when I think about the women's suffrage movement, women were not allowed to vote until 1920? And how difficult it was to get a vote. Again, we're not second-class citizens, and we shouldn't be treated as such. I like how present day we can really reach for the stars, and most of us can have aspirations of accomplishing things, and we can do it. But I think that's the crux. It's not always just society that we have to work with, the rules and whatever. We have to have relationships with individual women to say, you go girl, you can do that, and then to provide some framework in which we can help them launch.
Yeah. So being the youngest person here on the panel, how do you feel about today's norms?
Well, just to kind of go back on the history, sorry, I forgot your name. Jami. That Jami was referring to. You know, you add the other layer of being a Latina woman to that, and just acquiring rights also came at a much later time than that, and just access to just different societal benefits that we all have now. And so we have made great strides, but we need to also remember that that is another layer that continues to kind of go into the shadows, and so we continue to advocate for all women of color. I think, you know, for me, where it is now, there are a lot of opportunities, but we do face certain challenges, as we know, you know, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. That's a challenge for women's reproductive rights, and just healthcare in general. And that's important for women if, you know, they're vital to our society. They contribute to the economy. And so there is a great need for them to have that access to health care so that they can continue, you know, in their careers, continue having families, continue being productive members of society as well.
Absolutely. As a woman in business, I can relate with that, especially in the entertainment industry. It's very male dominant, and being one of the only women who would sit in some of the rooms and have to be able to make my voice be heard, to be able to get things put across, especially in a producing position where, you know, I was, you know, always maybe set to the back and then they would listen to the men. I'd have to say it was until Barbra Streisand called me to the front that actually started me to stand out when I was working on one of her shows. So that, you know, that really changed a lot for me, to where all of a sudden it wasn't always just the men being called up to work on lighting or do something. So that was a big move for me in my industry and in my career. Moving on to another question, we've had past achievements and women through history. You talked a little bit about that and some of the things that have happened through time. What are some of the things in history that really stand out to you, Rebecca?
I remember a character from Scotland in the year 1000. Her name was Margaret of Scotland. She was queen, and she was married to Malcolm III. She was a princess of England, and her family had to flee England when they were when her uncle went into power, because back then you killed off all your relatives so nobody would want your throne, right? Okay? So the family gets in a storm, and instead of ending up in the Mediterranean Sea and going to Greece, they end up in the Firth of Forth outside Edinburgh, and Malcolm finds this beautiful young princess about 16 years old, and he wants to have her, and so her parents say, if you take her as a wife, you can have her, and so on. Well, where I'm going with that is she wasn't just an idle queen sitting in the palace. She set up a soup kitchen, and she set up a public library, and she sewed gold pieces into her skirt, and she listened to the people. Anybody who has needs, come to me. Let me hear what your needs are, and once a day I'll give a gold piece to the person. So I look about women of charity, you know, I think about women of charity. I also see Margaret of Scotland as a woman of intellect, because she could argue with men, and she was learned. She had read every book in the Edinburgh Castle. She was a woman of standards. So, okay, we take it away from just one woman. That one woman represents what we all want to be. We want to be women of intellect. We want to be women of understanding. We want to be women who have relationships with others. We want to have compassion upon others who are different from us and maybe don't have all the advantages that we have. We have a responsibility to give. And there are so many women throughout history, Florence Nightingale And those scientists, those women who, you know, computed things that had never been computed before and launched things up into space and so on. I don't have their names, you know, to recite right now. But there have been amazing things that women who didn't have strings attached to them holding them back. Like I said earlier, we need to be conduits of the goodness that's been given to us and the freedom that's been given to us and that each of us have seized. And we need to help launch others in whatever way we can do it, whether it's a whisper of an encouraging word, whether it's money to help them out with their education, whether it's being an advocate for certain things that women need to have that are not readily available.
Absolutely. Do you think that having these months go by, it's Women's History Month, do you think it's important to have these months?
Definitely. You know, we always joke around in my profession, educator, well, every day should be, you know, right, Women's Day or Women's Month, because we do, like I said, we do add value. And so it's important to just highlight and bring it to the forefront, all of the issues that women face today, and hopefully find resolution to them and come together, as you were saying, really work with each other, partner with each other, form those relationships that are really going to allow us to continue to move forward. And yeah.
Great.
So Diane, you and I had lunch recently, and we were talking about this subject, and you and I had both, through social media scrolled through a video that we saw because it was Women's History Month, and it highlighted 5 or 6 women and how outstanding they were and what a big deal their accomplishments were. And both you and I agreed, we had no idea that these women had been the innovators that they were or the standout people that they were. And so it is really important, whether it's Women's History Month or, you know, related to something else, that we bring it forward and we shine a light on it, so that generally speaking, we become a little bit more educated on the other people in our society.
I agree. I love that video. The video opens with a man carrying all these different oranges, and then they all fall out of his arms. And if it wasn't for a woman who created the bag, we would all be dropping things everywhere. And then the video just went on. So there were all these things that it was like, oh, wow. Who would have known that that was a woman? Until we get to something like this and we start talking about it more and more and bringing it to the forefront, that we realize the impact that women have made over centuries at this point. Even though maybe we were denied certain things in a bank or other things, we're still putting ourselves out there and making a difference. Whether people want to hear or want to be a part of that or not, we're pushing forward, and I think that's remarkable. And sitting here with all of you, and I know all of you as women that keep doing that, who keep pushing that forward. So I say thank you to that. So, in honor of Women's History Month, how can we empower those that are coming up behind us? And how can we help, you know, young women of today be able to make their mark on society? Donna?
Well, I think definitely providing those opportunities to those young women, you know, starting off really young, you know, through K through 12 education system, just allowing them to explore different career fields, for example, mentorship amongst, you know, other women in different fields that they may be wanting to explore. And then also access to higher education, whatever that looks like. So whether it's a trade school, community college, or university, just having those different opportunities to be able to participate and see what is available to them, I think would provide several opportunities for them to move forward, and really understand, you know, that it's what is that saying? It's unlimited, basically, as long as they put the effort and they go through. There's resources for them to access those opportunities.
What are your thoughts, Jami?
So I did a little homework in regard to this subject of, what can we do for women who are coming up behind us? And it goes back to the let's spotlight the accomplishments of some other women. And I spent my first 2/3 of my life in my career working for somebody else and working within their corporation, their structure. And during that time, I truly was never better than just average. But when I broke out from that, and I got out from under that ceiling and whatever it was that was holding me back or not inspiring and motivating me, when I became an entrepreneur, there was no glass ceiling. There was no ceiling at all. And my success has far exceeded any of my expectations. And so I did a little homework on other women who started with zero. And the first one that comes up is Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx. And at the time that she was creating Spanx, she was actually an office supply salesperson, selling fax machines and toner and things like that. She took $5,000 of her own money and started Spanx from her kitchen table, sewing and creating and refitting. So that started in 2000, and by 2012, she became the world's youngest female self-made millionaire in just 12 years. She's just like us. So that was one. I love women who have reinvention stories. Did you know that Martha Stewart started out as a stockbroker? For whatever reason, she left that and she began a home-based business with a catering company that started from her own kitchen. And as we know, her story is just one of massive success. Taylor Swift also started with zero. She was just a 14-year-old girl who really wanted to sing. Now she's worth $1.1 billion. We know Oprah Winfrey started with zero. Barbara Corcoran, who's on Shark Tank, started with zero. We all know J.K. Rowling's story. For a period of time, she was actually homeless, and look where she is now. Another one is Bobbi Brown, who started as a makeup artist in Hollywood and got tired of only having red lipstick to choose from, and so created her own cosmetic line. And so those are some of the women that I think we should spotlight and let our younger women know that following a corporate path isn't the only option, but that becoming an entrepreneur and creating your own dream and your own path is actually a very true, important, very successful option.
Well, that hits to my heart because I believe that since I became an entrepreneur, my life has completely changed. I wouldn't go back to my best day working for Disney or Warner Brothers to trade for my worst day as an entrepreneur, because it doesn't get any better than being able to make your own decisions and make your own schedule and be able to do that. So I truly believe that, talking about women's history is what brings us, like you have said, it brings us to today, and it shows us the growth we still have to make and how we can empower others. So I think that's really important. So with that, I want to wrap up our roundtable. I want to thank you all very much for being here. It was very enlightening. I loved all the conversation, and I look forward to the next time having you back. Thank you.